Hi there, welcome back to my tutorial series, and I know what you might be thinking. You may have seen the title of this and thought, granny squares? Really? I was the same way when I first started crocheting. Granny squares were actually the first things that I learned how to make. At the time, I thought it's a basic square that you sew a bunch together to make a blanket. But the crafting community and the crochet community really went out of their way to make the granny square awesome again. You can make bags, cardigans, all sorts of things with granny squares, so I wanted to introduce everyone in my community and through this tutorial series how to make a basic granny square. Now, you're going to find a lot more out there, so once you get the basic granny square down, you can always evolve your skills into some other really awesome patterns. But before we get started, allow me to introduce myself. Hi there, my name's Colleen, aka Pixel Bear. I've been crocheting for a very, very long time, and I started this channel so I could share my love of crochet with crafters of all skill levels. If you're new to the channel, hit subscribe so you can see all my crochet videos and tutorials. Now before we get started, I just wanted to give you a quick heads up. If you've been following along with this tutorial series, you are set and ready to go for this video, but if you're coming into this a little bit late, you're going to need to know how to do a foundation chain, a slip stitch, and double crochets. For this video, you'll need medium weight, size 4 worsted yarn in any color. I personally think that granny squares look best when you change colors, so I'll be changing colors 4 different times, so I have 4 different colors here. I'm working with fall colors today, so I have a burnt orange, a gold, a dark deep red, and a dark blue to contrast everything. It actually looks really nice all together, you'll see. You'll also need a 5mm hook, a tapestry needle, and a pair of scissors to cut. Let's get started. So for my granny squares, I'm just going to show you what it looks like. I have the orange in the middle, which is 2 rows. We have the dark red, the yellow, and then the dark blue. It kind of goes light, dark, light, dark. Choose the colors that you like. To get started, you're going to start with your slip knot. All right, so here's our slip knot. Making the A, pulling it off my finger. There it goes. And then we make it tight. There we go. We have our slip knot on our hook. And we're going to do a chain of 5 to get started. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay. Then you're going to join it into a ring. So a magic circle technically would probably work. However, if you see my test one here, you can see that the center is kind of open, but it matches the size of all the other holes, so it looks very uniform. Don't recommend a magic ring on this one. So I crocheted 5, and now I'm making a ring. All you do is do a slip stitch into that, so put your hook in the first chain, and then I yarn over and pull through both. And that's just going to slip it together, make it nice and tight so it doesn't move. Now, I'm going to show you a little trick. I hate weaving in ends, so we're going to use the tail, and I'm going to tuck it into my project wherever possible. So I slip stitched. So it's together into a ring. You're going to chain 2, and then you're going to make 3 double crochets into that circle. So yarn over, 1, my second double crochet, and my third double crochet. And then I'm going to chain 1, and that's going to act as your corner. So when you make a corner in granny squares, you're going to put these little clusters, 2 of them in the stitch, and that's going to pivot your project. It'll make more sense when we're a little bit further along. We're going to use a few pieces of terminology that I want to cover real quick. When I say double crochet cluster, I mean 3 of these with a chain at the end. So if I say that during the video, just know that that's what I mean. I chained 1. I'm going to go back through and make another cluster in that center ring. So that's 3 more double crochets. 1, 2, and 3. Now your project might curl a little bit. That's okay. It'll kind of even out as you keep going. You'll also start to see it form into a square of sorts, but it's probably going to be rounded the first time, and that's okay. So there's my second cluster, chain 1. And as you can see, I'm still working over the ring as well as this tail. If you can, I recommend doing it because it saves you a step later. But if you are struggling to keep like that, to have the double crochet go over the ring and the tail, by all means, you can always weave it in later. It's just I hate weaving in tails, so I do it as much as possible as I go through projects. All right, so there's my third cluster, so you can kind of see it forming. Here's the one side of the granny square, the second side, and the third side. That chain in the beginning, the chain 2 that we started with, kind of creates its extra stitch. We're going to use that for something else though, so it might look a little bulky in the center, but when you go through, pulling out my swatch again, you really can't see where that extra one was. And that's why I use the extra one, and it forms a really nice pattern, and we'll get back to that. All right, so I have 3. Now I am going to go with 4. So I'm going to chain 1 more and put my 4th cluster in, still working over that tail. Now you don't want to go into the next row with that tail though, because you're going to see it on one of the sides. And trust me, I tried. Didn't look right. So let me make the mistake so you don't have to. All right, so we have 1 cluster, 2 cluster, 3 cluster, and 4 clusters. You're going to chain 1 to finish off that last cluster. And now we have the 4 sides. It looks like a circle, I know, but trust me, as we keep going, it'll start to look more square-like, clearly. All right, so the next part is to pull out. I'm using my tapestry needle just to kind of show where it is. You'll see this chain that we made. That's the chain 2 that we started that row with right there. That's where your next double crochet cluster is going to go. But first I want to join it so that it starts to create clean rows. With my last chain being still on my hook, I'm going to slip my hook into that spot, grab the yarn from the other side, and pull through to make a slip stitch. And that slip stitch is just going to get my hook into the right spot. And what that's going to do is it creates a nice, and again, it's a little rounded. Maybe I can pull it out so we can see the corners a little bit better. There you go. So you see it creates nice 4 clusters that make a... It's very circular right now, but it does create that center square. It'll start forming. So with a slip stitch on my hook, I'm going to chain 2, and this is going to act as the first stitch of this next cluster. That's why I slip stitched into that hole. It's going to actually act as the first stitch. So then I'm going to do 2 more to finish off that cluster. And then I'm going to chain 1. Now to form that corner, because this is going to be the first corner of the second row, we are going to make a second cluster in that same space. So don't go to the next space. We're going to use that same space, and we're going to make a second double crochet cluster. There we go. Looks a little weird. Looks like it's got a little hat on it now. We're going to chain 1, and then we're going to go to the next corner. So the next corner is the giant hole created by that chain 1 between the 2 clusters that we created before. So this is basically the side of the granny square, and then we're coming into another corner. So after I chained 1, I'm going to make another double crochet cluster. Chain 1, and going into that same hole, I'm making another corner. So I'm going to do another double crochet cluster. Like that. Ta-da. Can we agree that it's starting to look a little bit more squarish? We got 2 corners. All right. Chain 1. And we're going to do that same thing again. So we're going to do, without splitting my yarn, there we go. We're going to do a double crochet cluster. Make sure you chain between each of the clusters though. Always chain 1 no matter if we're working on a side or a corner. And since I'm working on the corner, chain 1, double crochet cluster right back into that hole there. 1, 2, and 3. Like that. And there's the other one. 3 corners. Chain 1 and 2 double crochet clusters in the next one. 3, chain 1 in between each. Don't forget that chain 1, folks. It's important. And then after my cluster, I chained another one. So it looks a little lopsided. You can kind of pull on the corners if you want, just to see the square, but we have a square. Kind of. Lumpy square. All right. So now we're going to finish this row. I actually want to change colors. So I am going to change to my red. So here's my red. I'm actually going to finish up a little red first. Hopefully this is enough red. So with my red, so I'm doing light, dark, we are going to, I usually change, this is a personal preference. It depends on where you're comfortable or what you're comfortable doing. You can join the next row with a slip stitch with the current color, or you can change and then create the slip stitch into the next stitch. It's really up to you. I prefer to do it ahead of time. However, it can get a little finicky to work with. I'm also going to show you how to change the color and then work the tail into it, because this is going to be a little tricky. This is where it gets a little tricky. After this, it's smooth sailing. Once you get this part down, smooth sailing, but you're going to have to stick with me for a minute, all right? So I'm going to pull that last chain out, leave the double crochet cluster. I'm going to put my hook back in like that. I'm going to grab my new yarn, my red. I'm going to put it on my hook and then pull through to complete the chain. And then I'm going to pull that orange nice and tight. Now with the chain in the new color, I'm going to snip the orange about the same length as the tail of the red. And that's mainly so that it's easier to work with. And I'm going to kind of keep these two tight so that they stay together. And then I'm going to take my hook and I'm going to put it, I'm going to move it up a little bit. I'm going to put it into the top of that chain, that first stitch there. You can see the V pretty easily on yours. So with all of that held nice and tight, I'm going to stick my hook into the top of the stitch, grab the yarn on the other side, and pull through 2 loops. And that's going to make that slip stitch. Now the reason I do it that way is you're really not going to see this color change very much. You can see on mine, you really can't see the color change too much. You can see a little bit of my orange tail that I have to tuck in. You really can't tell where the color change is on my sample here. So with the new yarn on and my tails, I'm actually going to trim this old tail so I don't start working that into the project too. You can pretty much trim that as soon as you're done with the first row. All right. So I'm going to kind of twist the yarn a little bit, pull out the new yarn, the red yarn here. And I'm going to keep these 2 tails in my view. Sometimes I grab them with my other finger just to keep track of them. And then I'm going to chain 2 like we did the last row. Now here's a little trick for you. Now follow any patterns that you have. If you're going to make a granny square, make sure you follow the pattern. But if you're just kind of making these basic granny squares, here's a little trick for you. Instead of continuing to the next hole or slip stitching to the next hole, I turn mine around. So after I chain 2, I flip mine over, and then I can easily tuck these tails into the project as I start going along. You can kind of see that they lay flat. So then I yarn over and I start making my clusters. That first 2 chains act as a stitch. And then I do 2 more to start that cluster. Then I chain 1. And that kind of locks them in. Now this orange didn't get underneath the stitches, and that's okay. But I'm going to leave those hanging for now. There is a way to avoid having to stitch everything in, but I'm going to show you the basic way. And then if anybody wants it, put it in the comments and I can show you how to hide these tails so you don't have to sew anything at the end. For my swatch here, I actually didn't sew in any of the ends. I actually just worked the tails in. I have to do a little trimming. I haven't trimmed it yet. But not looking at that, I actually didn't weave any of my ends in. This is all just part of the crochet project. So if anybody's interested in how I did that, I will absolutely do a demo for it. But I'll be honest with you, it's tricky and it looks really weird and I don't want to confuse anybody. So for this one, I'm going to leave my tails hanging. I want to make sure that the tails are long enough that I can sew them in later. So we'll get back to that because I do want to show everybody how to weave in ends. So I have my first chain. I have the first stitch of the cluster and the second stitch of the cluster. And now I'm going to continue. I chained one and I'm into the corner clusters here. So I make 3. I'm going to make another double crochet cluster, chain 1, and go into that same hole to make that corner. Okay, and here's my tails. There's going to be a lot of tails that we're going to weave in at the end, but that's okay. Then we're going to chain 1. So for the next one, we don't have a corner. We are on, I call it the wall or the side. I don't know why I call it the wall, but I do. I call it the wall of the granny square. So on the wall, we're just going to do a double crochet cluster and then move on to 2 double crochet clusters in the next corner. So let's do a double crochet cluster in this hole. 1, 2, and 3. Chain 1, and then we're into the next one. So we're going to do our next double crochet cluster right here in this corner. So we start another one. Make sure you chain, folks. Make sure you chain between the clusters. Always 1 chain, though you can do 2. If you want a sharper corner or you're using a thicker yarn, 2 chains between the clusters on the corners may be necessary, but check your pattern. Chain 1. All right, 1, 2, and 3. And chain 1. And we're on another wall, so we're going to do just 1 cluster into this one. That's 1, 2, and 3. Chain 1. And oop. Now we're going into the next corner there. We do 1. Work with me here. My yarn is not working with me. 2 and 3. Chain 1 and a second cluster in that. Now I'm going to go a little bit faster, so I'll see you at the end of this one. It's just 1 double crochet cluster and then 2 at the corner, and I'll meet you at the other end. Alright, so we are all set there. You're going to chain 1. And just kidding, we're not going to chain 1. I'm going to frog it back 1. Alright, so here's your square so far. Here's your tails. Is what it is. I'm going to change colors to my lovely gold color because I want to do the light, dark, light, dark. And I'm just going to grab my little center, move my orange because we don't need orange anymore. And I think I can get a little bit more use out of this as I make the rest of these. But let's grab the yellow, and I'm going to do my chain in this yellow color. So I loop it around, have the tail. Whoop. So I loop. 3rd time's the charm. I loop it around. I'm going to hold it this time. And complete the chain, pulling tight so that it stays together. And then I'm going to trim the red off. You don't have to trim the red yet. It's completely up to you. You can leave it while you do a few stitches if it helps you. And I'm going to kind of hold on to those 2 tails to keep them nice and tight as I slip stitch into the next one, grabbing the working yarn and not the tails, and I'm going to pull through. Always tight. Tighten, tighten, tighten. And I'm going to chain 2 and flip. So before we go any further, I just want to say why flipping helps. Again, I'd follow a pattern if you're going to follow a pattern, but why flipping helps is because it prevents the granny square from shifting. Where we want the granny square to be a perfect square, it'll actually shift and it'll start to kind of slant if you don't flip it. And that was always my issue, where I would have to then block projects even when I was using yarn that I didn't need to block with. I'll explain blocking in the next video when we put this together into the bag. With acrylic yarn, you shouldn't have to block. I'm using acrylic yarn. So you shouldn't have to block acrylic yarn, but I would have to because it would shift. By flipping it over like this, you no longer have to block it, which is great. All right, back to what I was doing. So, yarning over, I'm going to do my next cluster. Trying to work over those ends as best as I can, but we're going to come back and weave them in later. Oh, that's too many. Remember that first one counts as a stitch, and then you have 2 more for this cluster. Chain 1. Kind of tuck those behind so I can get to the next hole. And in we go. My yellow's already fighting me. Do you ever have battles with your yarn? I do, all the time. Alright, double crochet cluster, chain 1, and double crochet cluster. There we are. Alright, chain 1, and we're into the first wall. And by now, double crochet cluster followed by a chain. This is what's great about granny squares, is once you get the flow down, you just go. And since you're going to be repeating it over and over and over again to how many squares that you need, it's just a great project to just kind of zone out to once you get the basics pattern down. And what's really cool about granny squares is that you can do so many cool things with it. For example, last year for Christmas, was it last year? A couple years ago for Christmas, I made my nephew a blanket because he was just getting into Pokemon. I made him a blanket that was granny squares, and there was Pokeballs in it. So the center was a Pokeball, and then the outside was like blue and green. It was really cool, and he really, really liked it. Unfortunately, he grew out of it, so it must have been a few years ago. Was it really a few years ago? Dear Lord. Anyway. But he loved it, and it was fairly easy to do once I got the pattern down. It was a little bit tougher. I'll check the pattern again, and I'll pop the pattern that I followed in the description, if I can find it. But it was a cool pattern. And if you're a nerd like me and you like Pokemon, I almost wanted to make a blanket for myself with it, but I don't need more blankets. I just don't. Well, that was a good tangent as we get around the side here. So I'm going to meet you at the other end when I finish this row, and we'll get on to the next one. Alright, and on to our last cluster. Ta-da. Okay, so now I didn't chain this time, and here we have the yellow, and it is very square-like. I know it was kind of rounded at the beginning, but by the fourth row out, 1, 2, 3, 4, you should have a pretty square-looking granny square. Last but not least, this is my favorite color. I absolutely love this blue. I'm kind of a dull color person. I'm not like a vibrant neon color person. And I also love blue. I was excited that I still had some of this yarn and that it looked so good with the other colors as a contrast to the autumn leaf look that we're going with. kind of like an autumn sky, maybe. I don't know. But I love this blue. Very excited to be able to use it. Just as I did with the dark red, I do have a little bit of this blue left, so I'm gonna use this before I get into my next cake. So yeah. All right. So to change colors one more time to show it off, I loop it around, make my chain, trim the yellow. That was a really long tail. It's all right. We're gonna get rid of it anyway. I'd rather have too long of a tail than too short of a tail. And then holding these tails tight, I'm going to slip my hook into that top stitch, grab the working yarn for the blue, and pull through to create the slip stitch. Chain 2 and flop it over. Whew, got a lot of tails going on here. That's okay. It's expected. We'll take care of it. Don't worry, folks. All right. So now we're going to make our double crochet cluster, working over the tails as best we can. That yellow one we're not really working over. Just going to make the 2 though, because that first one acts like our stitch. And then we have 2 more. Chain 1 and the next one. And again, if anybody wants to see how to make this granny square while working in the tails, let me know in the comments. I will absolutely make a short to kind of show you how to do it. The reason I'm not showing you now is it is a beginner-friendly granny square, and I feel that if I include it, it's not going to be as beginner-friendly. I don't want people to feel like you have to do that way. I want to show how you can do it easy and weave in the ends, and then if you're feeling comfortable, come back and see a more complicated way of working in the ends. I am one that says work smarter, not harder, in as many cases as I can, and I really don't like to weave in ends. Some people find weaving in ends very comfortable. Almost like it's a mindless thing that you can just do. So if you like weaving in ends, some people do. I've heard hot takes that some people like weaving in ends. Just don't like it. So if you're interested, I will make a short that shows you how to do this. And if you're wondering what you can do with granny squares, you can really do so many things with granny squares that I didn't even think about. The crochet community is kind of awesome of how creative they are. You know, I'll say a little story about my granny square history while I'm working on this. If you don't want to hear this and you're like just quiet and do the tutorial, totally fine. I just have to talk because this row's pretty long. I'll put a timestamp in, or you can just fast forward and wait until I get to the end so I can show you how to finish it. But if you want to, I'll tell you my story about granny squares. So if you've seen any of my other videos, I have been crocheting for a long time. 21 years as of now. But, you know, hopefully this video continues to reach people. So 21 years so far. Currently, I've been crocheting, and the very first thing I made was a granny square. My friend, I used to be in Girl Scouts. Let's go Girl Scouts. My friend was doing her leadership project, and she wanted to make blankets for I'm thinking of the right word. Retirement homes. There we go. We'll say retirement homes. Definitely wasn't thinking old people home. That's mean. So for retirement homes, she was making blankets, and she taught any friend that wanted to learn how to crochet. She would teach you how to crochet. She'd get the yarn. She had yarn donated to her, and she'd get you a hook and all the materials you needed. She'd teach you how, and then you would make as many granny squares as you could. And then she would take those granny squares and she would make them into blankets and donate them. It was a great project. I had a lot of fun, and that's how I learned how to crochet when I was 15 years old. I'm not going to say my age because then you all can figure it out. But it was a lot of fun, and I realized how soothing it was, and I actually dropped crochet for a little while afterwards because I thought it was granny squares or nothing. So I didn't know how to make the cute stuffed animals, and not that amigurumi was a big thing back then, and if it was a big thing, I didn't know about it. But yeah, so there is the little story about how I got into crochet, and I didn't chain on the corners, folks. All right, 1, 2, 3. And if you fast forward and didn't want to hear my granny squares story, totally understand. Welcome back. All right, 1, 2, and 3. All right. Back at the beginning, I am not going to change colors anymore. This is obviously my last row, so I am going to insert my hook, grab the yarn, pull through, and pull through. And I lock my projects with a slip stitch at the top. Some people don't. I just don't feel secure not doing it. So I do a slip stitch at the top, and you're not going to see it when all of the pieces are together. Boop. And now we have our granny square. Now we have tails all over the place. We got another tail there, another tail there. I'm going to show you how to weave in all your tails. So I start with the center and I work my way out, and then I'll do the other side. If you're a chaotic person, you can go whatever order you want. Neutral, good, evil, doesn't matter. But I'm going to do inside out, because I tend to sometimes forget. And then I give the gift, and the tail is still attached. So turning the project, however way works for you. I'm actually going to turn it this way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to weave the ends into the base of that row. And especially it helps going towards a corner, because you'll have a lot of room to kind of tuck it in. So I put the yarn on my needle, and I'm going to slip it into the base of my my double crochet cluster stitches. And I do them 3 at a time. You can do 6 if you're sneaky like that, but I did the first 3, and then I'm going to take this and push it through to do the second 3. Now you can do another set. You can, if you want to be even more so, you can kind of weave it into your stitches like that, where you're at the top and you're kind of weaving it in. It's however you want to do it. I don't think you have to go past 2 double crochet clusters if you're working in the corner like that. It's not going anywhere. So then take your scissors, I pull a little bit, I take my scissors, I cut, and then I stretch it back so that the tail sits inside of those stitches. Let's do it again. So taking my red, pop that on. And for this one, I'm going to go back this way because I'm closer to this corner, and I don't want to have the red on the orange. So I'm going to take it. I'm not going to go back through. I'm actually going to kind of tuck it that way, because if I go back through, I'm kind of losing the support, and nobody's going to see it go over this particular piece of yarn. So I'm going to take it. I'm going to pop it through. Now this is going back towards the chain. You can see the chain here. So I'm going to pop it through the 2 stitches, and I'm going to pop it right into that as well, into that foundation, or into that chain that we did. I'm going to pull through, and as you can see, you really can't see. Now, as crocheters, we're going to see some of the stitch work sometimes, but you can't really see. The block of color kind of hides it all. And then I'm going to take these, and I'm going to pop it into the base of those double crochet clusters, pull through, and I'm going to do it one more time, since this is kind of further away from the corner. Is there an exact science for weaving in ends? I don't think so. If there is, I'm sure that there might be people that are better at weaving in ends than I am. But I just do what works. And that's kind of my philosophy with all crochet. Just gonna do what works. All right, to the yellow, I'm gonna go to this cluster. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show you another little trick that I do when I weave in ends. If I went straight to these 3 double crochets, you'd see the gold on top of this red, and I don't want that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna work the yarn up through this stitch. Just grab a loop, don't pull, you don't want to separate it, but you kind of add the yarn to the stitch up, and then I'm gonna slip it into this blue. So I'm gonna hide it inside the blue cluster above it, because it's already hiding, you know, the single crochet between my 2 clusters. So now that I'm back at the yellow, or gold, I can work the yarn down the stitch, and then I can go into the base of the clusters. Base of the cluster stitches? Yeah, that's probably better. And then I'm going to do that again. And with it in the corner, take my scissors, and we're going to pull a little bit and chop. And again, the reason I pull is when I kind of lay it down flat and push a little bit, it's going to hide the yarn better. And now we have this last yellow here. For this one, I'm going to probably stay at the top and go to this corner. So kind of using the same philosophy as my last one. I am going to take my end and I am going to weave it at the top. You can see the stitches of the double crochet clusters there. I'm going to take it and weave it into the top so that I can get to that blue cluster there. And then I'm going to take my yarn, stick it through the cluster, and then I'm going to take the yarn again, move it down the stitch a little bit. Just find a couple of loops where it can slip through. Again, do not pull on these loops because you're going to start ruining your stitch work. Don't want that. So you want to be very gentle when you're doing it. Don't just shove the needle in. Speaking of shoving the needle in, let's shove the needle into these double crochet clusters and pull through. And we'll do one more for good measure. And I definitely didn't split that yarn, but that's okay. It's a bag for me. Me personally, I don't care if there's a split yarn in between these two. Nobody's ever gonna see it. I won't even see it. I'll forget it's there. Alright, pull a little bit and snip. And there we have it. Just kidding. You want to flip over and make sure that you have everything else done, because we have another tail here and another tail here. Now I'm going to pull. I know I didn't go through both sets of clusters, but that's okay. But you really can't tell where any of the ends are. I do have this top one. I'm going to leave this one for now. I like to know where my knot is so I can kind of hide it better, so I'm going to leave that for now. And there we have our granny square. Congratulations on making your first granny square. So I have a little bit of homework for you. Over the next week, make 7 more identical squares, or mix in some different colors but keep the same pattern. Make 7 more of those, and next week I'm going to show you how to put it all together to make a bag, something like this. Thank you so much for watching my video. If you found this video helpful, hit that like button and hit subscribe to catch my next crochet video or tutorial. Until then, happy crocheting!